Welcome. This is the second of our tutorials, and today we're going to be working out how to animate a still. There's several different ways we can go about this. The first one I'm going to show you is the one I'm going to show you is the simplest. Basically, what we'll do is we'll cut out our subject here. We'll give a few more examples as well. We'll just be cutting out our subject in Photoshop, filling in the background area, and then bring them into After Effects and animate them. So let's get started. So this image I've got from unsplash.com, excellent photography website. So let's have a quick look. Go over to Photoshop here. We zoom in, Control and plus, or Windows and plus. And there's a few different ways we can do this. So first of all, I'm double clicking on the background to bring up layer, change the name of it. So now it's no longer locked. And we can look at the properties panel here. Now straight away, actually if I undo what I've just done, we're not going to notice that we're not going to have that option. Okay. So we double click on background, hits make it layer 0, the lock is gone. And now let's give this a try. Okay, it doesn't always work. Generally it'll work best with something like this. So we can hit select subject. We'll see what Photoshop gives us. So it's already instantly made a brilliant cutout of our snowboarder. I can zoom out by hitting Control 0 to view everything in the space allotted. I'll zoom back in, spacebar to turn my pointer into a hand to help me drag around. You can see I got this bit here missing from the selection, so I will hit W to bring up the wand tool, and holding down Alt or Option, I will click this area here. Boom, it gets deselected. So I can come over here and hit the layer mask icon, and we've got a perfect selection. So what I'm going to do is actually undo that. First of all, I'm going to duplicate the layer, call this one background, and this one snowboarder. And mask it out. Okay. So that's the easiest way to do it on this particular photo, because it's a very clean, almost homogeneous background. You know, you got this grayish white here, bluish grayish white here. You know, it's very, very easy. Now I can see that there's that tiny zip there. Now chances are you are never going to need this level of detail in a Photoshop document. We can see it's literally only 1 or 2 pixels. If you decide you do, to add and take away from the mask, you would use the brush tool, which is over here. You can just hit B for brush. Same way, P equals pen, B equals brush. And you'll notice that you'll need black and white here. Black will take away from the mask, and white at the foreground, white at the foreground will add to it. So you can see out here it's adding to it. Now that's kind of mucked up what I wanted, so I'll just hit Control Command Z to undo. I know it's over here a little bit, so I use square brackets over by the return key to make my brush smaller and larger. And here the brush is ridiculously small, but I'll just brush along there like that. So I need to see where I'm going. And that's probably going to do the job. That's really it. It's just a bit of showing off there. You wouldn't necessarily need that level of detail. And again, you might. Okay, so that's snowboarder done for us. Okay, so we go back to the background. Another option is to go into the paths, give us a new path, change our pen tool to our pen tool by hitting P. We'll zoom in, and we start clicking and drawing. Those of you with expertise in Photoshop and Illustrator will find this quite easy. And for me, certainly the pen tool I think is the most worthwhile tool and workflow to learn in Photoshop and Illustrator. And you can be as detailed or as loose with this as you like. It's entirely up to you, you know. In certain cases you want to be detailed, and the more you practice with this, obviously the better you become. So we plot our points as such. Now some folks, when it comes to large curves, such as you'd have on the leading edge of your snowboard, I tend to, oops, I would do a point here, and then another one's part of the way down. And of course we're going to come back to finesse it anyway. We go over to the pen tool here and hold down, drag out, convert point tool. This one will allow you to create these points, handles they're called, which will turn it from like a fixed point into more of a curve. Bezier handles, Bezier curves. Alright, that'll do for now on that one. Doesn't need to be too detailed. I'll continue with the others. I'll make a second, but I'll just call that main outline. Not that you need to name it, but it's useful. And then I'll hit and make this button here for another one. I'll keep going. Main outline selected. I'll hit this button here. If I hover over it, it says load path as a selection. Boom. Now I also need to remove path 1, which is these inner pieces. So I'll hold down Alt or Option, click on that. And you can see how these guys are now punched out. So for now, I'll delete that layer mask. See? I'm going to select the area of the snowboarder by control clicking on the mask area itself. Okay, so just hover over. This is the layer mask. And I'll hold down Control on a PC or Command on a Mac and just click on it. And it puts the selection in the window. So what I'm going to do now, with that selected, I'm going to go up to Edit, Fill. And this is an amazing bit of voodoo, content aware fill. So in order for this to work, you need to have something selected in your layer or your PSD. So what it's going to do is fill in this area based on the rest of the image. Sometimes it works amazingly, sometimes it needs a lot of help. Occasionally, depending on your image, you'll need to do it in installments. So let's see what it gives us. Wow, that was good, that was quick. So deselect it, and you can see there's a bit of fringing and whatnot going on. So to tidy it up, there's a couple of options. You can repeat it again. So Shift and F5. You can see there's a tiny difference there, not enough to really be worthwhile showing you. I'm going to deselect it. I'm going to go over to there's a couple of different options here. We've got the clone stamp tool, which is this thing here. We hit S for that. Or we can use the healing brush. So we've got a few different variations. There's the patch tool and healing brush tool. So what this does, it kind of samples what's underneath the crosshairs there, target site crosshairs, and then it'll paint it in over here for me. And we also have to bear all this in mind up that way. So generally the defaults will work. Occasionally you might need to change it from normal to replace. Now this will depend on your image, but for this one everything generally should be quite easy. So basically that's it. We just sort of paint it out. Now you do have to be careful around your edges, because if I start going down there, I get a bit of blue, I don't need that. So I'll go back down that way. Now depending on the complexity and speed of your shot, you may not even need to do this extra step. However, it just depends on you and what you're looking to achieve. And it's important to keep sampling from various other parts of the image, in order to make sure that you're not getting a load of patterns. And it's important to save this as something that you're going to be able to use smoothly inside of After Effects. We're going to just save it as a PSD. So Control Shift save it somewhere relevant, and then we'll see in After Effects. So here we are back in After Effects. We can import our PSD a number of ways. I always find the easiest way is to just double click in the project window here. Grab the two of them. Dude with hat, snowboarder. Maybe it's the same guy. I don't know. We hit import. It's gonna. Oops. Oh, this is something that will turn around to get at you. So I need these to be layers, or all layered up, and they're only 2 layers each. But either way, it's come in flattened. I don't want that. So we'll have to do it somewhat differently and pay attention to the import dialog rather than just blindly hitting import as I just did. So when you select more than 2 or more PSD layers to import them into After Effects, you'll have to go down to this option here, footage, and change it from footage, which will just give it be a flattened layer, to composition, retain layer sizes. And what that will do is it'll bring in our backgrounds at the full size of the PSD, and our subjects, in this case the snowboarder, the guy just standing there, they'll be, I don't know, they'll be like maybe 500 by 1000 pixels or something like that. So we import them, and it's actually also a good idea to, you can give yourself a descriptive name like dude with hat and snowboarder, but given that I've got these from a stock website and they'll need to be credited, I've kept the original file names in there as well, as ungainly as it might be to try to pronounce Jack DeLulio, IP dub, etc, unsplash. Keep it for reference purposes. Now anyway, when they come in, you can see up here we've got a couple of folders which has the PSD layers, and they're named appropriately, and the comps. Now these are the size of each individual layer, or each individual PSD, so I think they're going to be quite large. So we'll hit Command K. You can see that this is 1920 by 1080 display, and hit Command K or Control K on a PC to bring up your composition settings, and that is 2600 pixels across and 3900 pixels high, so that's quite large. If you're working on a small laptop, this is going to make it difficult for you. So you can always scale it down in Photoshop to begin with. Basically, the less work that After Effects has to do, the easier you're going to find it. So there's that's basically it. So we've got our switches, our modes, our track mats and everything. I'll give myself a bit more room. I'll hit Command 0, which will close the project window. It won't close the project or After Effects, but it'll give me a bit more space to muck around with. So what I'm going to do here is Command Alt Shift and Y, or Command Option Y, to bring up a null layer, or you can go right click anywhere in the composition or timeline, new null object. We can do the same again, right click, new camera. So this is going to give us a bunch of different options here. So what I'm going to pick is a 2-node camera. You do have an option of 1 and 2, but for now 2 is what we're going to need, and generally everything's going to be cool. Maybe just pick the 50mm preset, and we're going to get a little warning box pop up saying doesn't affect 2D layers. Thanks After Effects. We just hit OK, and the other bad boys, we're going to make them 3D layers by clicking on these icons here. Now, having done that, we're going to parent the camera to the null object. Boom. That means that I can drag the camera around. Basically, it's like putting it on a dolly or something on a film set. Now, in order to give ourselves a bit of parallax, what we'll do is we'll push the background far away and then scale it back up again. Now, with something like this, it's going to be quite easy because the snowboarder's in the air. Now, you can see here that there's the kicker that he's launching off of, and there's probably another one further away in the distance. Now that could be where he's going to. My guess is with his height he's probably going to land on the reverse side of this, but you've got, this is your foreground, this bit here and this bit here will be your midground, and all that is going to be your background. So we may need to do some secondary masking and separating of layers, but again is up to you. So if I hit S to scale, bring up the scaling parameter, and hold down Shift and P, then I can see position as well. And let's see how it looks 1,000 pixels away. It's not very far. It is a large image, so these distances will have to be further. So 3,000 pixels. Let's give 300% a shot. A bit too much because there's a lot of detail lost there. Okay. Our snowboarder is at 100%, and here's our X value. So that's the position from the left of the comp to here, and the Y value, which is from the top to where he is, and 0, that's in Z space, so he's at 0 on the X, Y, Z axis. So I'm going to leave that as it is, and what I'm going to animate here is the position of our null, which is going to pull or push the camera whatever way we desire. So we can always change it up. Now you can see a bit of parallax happening already there with our snowboarder. And you can do something cool with this, actually. I just thought of, maybe we can try go through the gap between his legs, or her legs. You can see it does start to fall apart, so you got to make that snappy, make it quick, and we'll do it in reverse. So this actually is the last frame, but we can change the keyframe order. We'll push through there. Boom. Oh yeah. So in order to change the order of the keyframes, select all of them. In this case there's only 2, so we can select all the keyframes in a layer by clicking on the property, right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. The last was first and the first is last. And we might want to slow that down a bit, so we'll hit F9 on the keyboard to bring up the easing, or to ease the keyframe, so it'll be slow in, bit of acceleration in the middle and slow out. This icon here is the graph editor, so you can see this is as fast as it's going to get. This is top speed. That's its finish point. But I want to change that a bit by selecting, just clicking and dragging over one of those keyframes in the graph editor. It brings me up these handles, which work like the Bezier handles in Photoshop earlier. And I can click and drag. You can see how it's going to change. So what this means is it's going to accelerate into this point here and then gradually ease out. Now there are plugins such as Flow which will save a lot of presets for you. I'd highly recommend something like that because it makes it a lot easier to manage. So I actually want that to be even harsher. I want it to be really quick through the legs and then a slow ease. I'm trying to keep that curve as clean as I possibly can. I'll preview it, I'll hit spacebar. Oh, I was quick. What happens without it? Oh. Let's see how it looks anyway. So maybe that was enough. Now that was at quarter res. If I put it at full res, it may not look as crusty. Here we go. The thing that I want to animate is his arm, but I don't want his entire arm to turn into a wet noodle either, so I'll have to put down quite a few. So put one on his wrist, elbow, shoulder, head, hips, knees, and ankle. We'll see how this works. It could be overkill, but if we look over here under mesh 1, puppet, it will show me a bunch of pins, keyframes under deform. So it's got 10 keyframes, puppet pins there. So hit U, they'll show up. So I'll go to the end. I need to zoom in a bit for that by hitting full stop. So I drag this over, you can see the motion path that it's going to go. It's just going to go that distance, and as a result the other pins close to it tend to move as well. So it's just that extra little bit of added realism. Like, the thing is, everything starts to deform. So if I move his knee, the snowboard itself starts to deform, and not necessarily in the way I want it to. Now that can work. That can be funny, if you're doing a comedy cartoon effect or something. Like maybe someone's eating a bunch of chili peppers, for example. Or I can do it that way, and then move this one too, try to preserve the straight edge of the board. You can see it's starting to turn into a banana there. With this kind of thing, less is definitely more. So I'm going to undo both of those, or delete them. You can see the difference. It really doesn't need to be much. And it's really all in the... Now what this does is it's like a rubber hose or wet spaghetti. So it doesn't give it sort of bones. That's something else to look at. That would be inverse kinematics, which is a completely other world. Something it's beyond the scope of this tutorial, but I'll just give it a little nudge. You'd use this pin technique with a lot of other character animations, but you see it's just really subtle. It's nice. We could try see how it looks with easing that final keyframe as well. Okay, so I've imported some stock footage here. Basically it's bokeh and dust and that kind of thing. Now what I want this to look like is, when I bring it in, it's on a black background, so obviously that's not what we need, but we change our transfer modes, and transfer modes are the same as in Photoshop. So I change it from normal to screen, punch out the black, just get rid of it, and just get rid of my project window for now. I just need to be able to see my timeline a bit better. Don't need the parenting, so I can hide that. So I haven't made that 3D, so it just kind of sits there, and that's a little subtle detail which is kind of cool. Now if I want, I can put it behind my snowboarder, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I'll just leave it on top for now. It's good to experiment and see what you can achieve. Now what I would like is to have it like a plume of snow, or even smoke might do the job here. So I can see that there's definitely 4 mid and backgrounds going on there, so I'm going to start masking them out ever so slightly. So I'll give myself a bit more space. I'm going to change my view from active camera to front. We got a whole bunch of different views here, so custom view is always a good one. If we hit C, or we go up to camera tools up here, so if we just hit C, they'll give us one that looks like Saturn, and we can scoot around. And you can, when you build a big 3D scene with a bunch of different objects, this is the kind of thing that you'll be doing quite a bit of, because you need to make a good scene and then throw your camera through it. If we hit C again, it changes it to a left and right view, or up down, and C again, and you can zoom in and out. Now if you once you don't have the camera selected, which is why mine's locked, so I can't, that won't make any difference. So you can just have a quick look around, you can see what's going on. And then we can change our view if you like. We can go to custom view 2, 3. By default this is what you'd get, but you can change it with the camera tool. And then you've got a few other ones like left and right, where this is my background selected, this is my snowboarder, this is my null layer. So we'll go back to active camera and start masking out our background bit. Now there was nothing to stop me doing this in Photoshop, but equally it wasn't something that I was considering at the time, so we'll do it here now and see what we can get. So the pen tool in After Effects is G, and that creates masks. So I'm gonna have to duplicate this into a bunch of different layers. So I'm gonna call this midground. So we can add some things like dust and dirt and smoke and whatnot. Just composite them in. Generally just going to be setting them to the screen transfer mode. And you can just see really subtle little details there. I think the bokeh is a bit much, but I like the bokeh up here, down here, whatever. There's a little smoke hit as well, which I think is someone dropping a bunch of flour onto a floor shot from above. And you can see the slight little subtle movement of the right arm, and that's just an exaggerated example of an animated still. Something like that, you cut out your subject, push them around in 3D space, ta-da, there we go. And we'll catch you in the next one.